Todd, why don't you say hi to our listeners out there today?
Hello, everyone.
Thanks for being on today. Really appreciate it. Todd is a very interesting guy. Todd runs an appraisals business, as evidenced by his creative business name, Todd Sawatzky Appraisals.
I went
Todd
way out to figure
also
that one out.
Todd also worked at the Hockey Hall of Fame for a while, and during that time, um, I don't think it really started his love for collecting, but it certainly um just must have done wonders for your love for it. And I'm sure you I know from seeing your fan cave that you just have an incredible collection of both jerseys, pucks, cards, signatures, pretty much every facet of hockey that you would want to collect. Todd's got in his very impressive basement. So, Todd's on today to talk a little bit about the history of the game, like we have been, appraisals and collecting and what that's about, and just kind of jerseys in general, and what he loves about the older or new jerseys and all the tiers in between. So, Todd, thanks so much for being on. Really appreciate
Yeah,
you.
thank you for the invite. I appreciate it.
So, let's start at the beginning. You're in Ontario right now. You're
hmm
wearing a Jets jersey. So, are you
Yeah,
from the Toronto area and or sorry, the Ontario area on the West Coast, or are you from Manitoba and you're a Jets
I
fan
am
through and
originally
through?
from Manitoba. Yes, so um, that is where I started playing hockey as a kid. I grew up southeast of Winnipeg, near a small community called Landmark, Manitoba. Um, the interesting fact of that, if you are the history or trivia questions, it is the most centrally located village in Canada on the 96th latitude, I believe that would be called, or longitude. So right dead center in the middle of Canada, about an hour and a half from the border. And yeah, that's where I started. That's where I started my love of the game.
That's really cool that you're truly from the Winnipeg, Manitoba area. You're a Jets fan. You must be super happy that you have a team again. It hasn't been without the heartache in between. It was weird too because, before the Jets entered the NHL, they were really, really good in the WHA, right? Like
Yeah,
they won
out of
a couple
they won
championships.
they won four Avco Cups in in a very well. They made it to the final six times, won four, and yeah, they were the powerhouse. That was the WHA.
Yeah.
Um,
And
they were one of the first teams to bring in Swedish players, for example.
mhm.
So a lot of the European invasion came through the WHA, which trickled into the NHL. You always had the odd exception in the NHL, but not nearly to the extent where they were actually the superstars of the league.
Right. I mean, the Jets were, for all intents and purposes, like a very competitive team throughout that league's existence. I mean, as other
Uh,
teams were popping up and folding, they were still running show.
mhm.
They were able to take advantage of the reverse clause in the NHL and take a lot of the players that were not under current contract in the NHL and bring them into that league. So that's how you see the richest contract in hockey history at the time with Bobby Hull joining the team and stuff like
The
that.
Bobby Hall contract guaranteed. Without that contract, I don't think the WHA would ever come into existence. Um, they asked him what it would take for him to jump ship to the WHA, and he said $1 million. So they signed him to a $2 million contract with $1 million bonus, signing bonus, 10 years at 100,000, and the rest is history.
Yeah, it's quite, I mean, he's one of the players who now has his number retired by the Jets organization. It's kind of,
Original Jets organizer.
yeah,
Yes.
it's kind of interesting. I know the Jets as a franchise have been there twice, so it's always kind of like, how do I talk about the team's history and what record books are we talking about here? But in a weird kind of cool sort of way, like Bobby Hull gets his number retired, but it's then followed to Phoenix when they move there. And then also Brett Hull, his son, near the end of his career, ends up playing in Phoenix and takes his dad's number. So they unretire it so his son can wear it and
Hmm.
then put it back in the rafters when he leaves.
Yeah,
And
that was a short-lived experiment. Yeah.
it was very weird. Yeah, for sure. But the other strange thing is like you were definitely the guy to know this. It's not like Dale Howard-Chuck's number is hanging in the Phoenix Coyotes buildings, right?
It is actually.
Oh, it is? Okay, great.
Oh yeah.
So,
Yeah.
maybe this will help clarify things for listeners. Is the current Winnipeg Jets team, like, for following records and franchise and stuff, like, which ones do they
Their records got followed from Atlanta. For example, Ilya Kovalchuk is still in the top 10 scoring in the current Winnipeg Jets history.
Okay,
Stuff like that. So Atlanta, which joined the league 99, from 99 until present, that is where their stats are coming from. The Jets do have a their version of the Jets Hall of Fame. So they are honoring past players that could be WHL, NHL, whatever. So they do have banners in the rafters for some of those players. Howard being one of them. They're what they call their production line of Bobby Hall, Anders Nielsen, and or Anders Hedberg and Ulf Nielsen. They've honored Randy Carlyle and Ab McDonald, previous captains of the team. Ab McDonald was the first captain of the Winnipeg Jets. That goes into the WHA era, of course, where Carlyle was one of the last captains of, if you want to call it Jets 1.0 before the move to Phoenix.
gotcha. Wow, there's a lot of history there. I mean, how do you feel about like in normal circumstances going to a Jets game for hypothetical and like so then they don't have the numbers retired, right? And how does that sit with you?
Uh, Currently, they don't have the numbers retired, and I'm perfectly good with that.
Okay.
Different franchise, different stats.
Yeah.
But what I love is they honor and respect the original franchise, and that's
Mhm.
why I absolutely love their heritage jerseys. First in 2016 with the white version, and 2019, actually a jersey I'm wearing now, the blue version, and it's the colors of the WHA era.
Yeah.
Basically, their final Avco Cup championship style of jersey is what they've honored with um, the heritage jersey.
Yeah,
So the
I love that too. I and I mean I love the ways that the Jets organization has found that blend between, hey, we are a new team, new set of, records. I mean, minus their time in Atlanta. But like for all intents and purposes, different than the other Jets, but we're still gonna figure out a way of keeping the peace,
yeah
with our fans, so to speak. I don't think
yeah
anyone's gonna join the Jets and start clamoring to wear Howard Chuck's old number and stuff like that.
no one's going to be bothered by seeing the old jerseys. That is for damn sure. And now
And
that they've incorporated that logo into their heritage jerseys, it's just one more reason to wear a current jersey with the old logo.
for sure. And like, what do you think of the reverse retro of the Jets? Because I mean, I
Conceptually, I
go,
I
yeah,
love it. conceptually, I love it. To me, that is the 1980s or the 1979 style of jersey. I just don't like the colors. I don't like the fact that they went with the, if you want to call it the grayscale.
Hmm.
Um, I like even and I know I've heard people that don't like those shoulder stripes, for example, but that's what the Jets had, and
Hmm.
that's something like that or details like that I absolutely love. But then when you see it in, if you want to call it black and white with just a hint of blue in there, um, yeah, it's weird. I mean, I'll buy one eventually, I'm sure. I'll wait for the Jet store to put them on sale for 50% off, and then I'll buy one from them. But otherwise, I think they could have done better. I think they could have done better. Like maybe something kind of how the Washington Capitals did it with the swooping eagle. Um, Instead of the teal, they have the current color scheme of the team, and they did the predominant red. Something like that for the Jets, where instead of it being a prominent blue, but making it red with maybe reversing the stripes with the blue and stuff. I think could have really set it to another level.
Yeah,
But
I
that's my
mean,
personal standpoint.
no, I mean it's what I've been doing while you're talking to is I'm looking at the like concept art that's in Fabric of the Game, the book, on like some of the earliest designs that they had as a choice when the franchise was moving to the NHL. And I'm also looking at the reverse retro, and I'm hearing what you're saying about those heritage jerseys. And it's all kind of coming together in this reverse retro because the striping that you're talking about is very indicative of their first style jerseys. And then also that grayscale color scheme is very, very, very similar to one of the color schemes that was originally proposed as the first jersey for the Jets to wear in
Okay.
their first year in the NHL, when like their jersey was this big W crest instead. And
Mm.
so it looks pretty interesting. Here, I'll well, I don't want to show the book because I want people to buy the book. It's an awesome book, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's it's
send me the link to what that book is, because that would be something I would definitely be interested in picking up.
yeah.
I like you said, I have heard that it was a concept of one of their early designs from the move,
Hmm.
um, but I haven't seen all of the concept art.
So I mean, as a guy who appreciates history and like the iterations of this team and stuff, um, it's kind of interesting how factoids like that affect my perception of liking this jersey or not. Like, I actually like this jersey way more now because I'm like, oh, that's really cool that you included that.
Mhm.
And um, one of like this jersey to me, this reverse retro Jets falls into the category of not one of my favorites, but when you see the whole kit, like when the player is with the helmet, the gloves, and the pants and
I
stuff,
agree.
it's awesome.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. The colors do pop. It's just when you're used to the blues, and like
yeah.
I know a lot of people don't even like, if you want to call it, their third with just the Jets logo, um, with their secondary blue being the primary color. I actually love it. I think it's nice and clean, and actually some of the original WHA Jets jerseys from 1972 or so on, they just had a very plain Jets written
Mhm.
word crest. It wasn't their logo per se, but that was their crest, and it incorporated that into it. So I do appreciate little details like that.
Yeah, for sure. And talking about little details like that, let's get into Todd Sawatzky, the appraiser, a little bit
Hmm.
because um, clearly you need to have some eagle eyes as you're looking at stuff.
Hmm.
And an appraiser is got to have a lot of other knowledge over what they're looking over if they're supposed to value some things. And um, I want to start at the beginning of that. So I figure your time at spent with the Hockey Hall of Fame had some impact on you wanting to be an appraiser. So I'm not sure where you want to start your journey of how you became an appraiser, but I'm very curious how that fits in with your hockey fandom.
It just kind of came about. It's actually something my wife Tiffany mentioned to me, because a lot of people would come up to me because of my passion for collecting. Would come up to me and, what's this worth? I've even had card shops ask me for opinion on things when I've been in their shop and stuff, and they're like, "So what do you think of this?" And it's like, "Yeah, looks good. No, that's crap," stuff like that. Um, and I would mention it. She's like, "Well," and then I started looking around and getting some of my own stuff appraised, and finding a sports memorabilia appraiser, even whether it's for insurance purposes or whatever, um, I found it incredibly difficult. And then she's like, "Well, why don't you just do it?" So that's when I did some looking around, and I found a reputable organization called the Canadian Personal Property Appraisal Group, that I took a course with and got certified, and so I am a member of that group. So technically, I can appraise anything, not just sports memorabilia, but because it's what I know best and what I love to work with, that is what I am focusing on.
Very cool.
So it kind of became, it was kind of a granular transition. So, but then even in the appraisal process, I have a mental switch. I have to turn off looking at it as a collector and, would I want to buy this? And if I were to buy this, how much would I want to spend? And blah blah blah. So there is that aspect to it, and then it's just like, nope, this is what this is. I catalog it. I assess it. I check the market, what the items are being sold for, and based upon my assessment of the market, I come up with a calculated value. So
Yeah,
that's what an appraisal is in essence. It's a calculated assessment of value, and that the market really dictates it. So something that may be worth $500 today, last week technically could have been worth 400. It all depends. The market does have ebbs and flows. So and based upon the assessment, I produce a legal document. So I date of course, all my documents are dated. So I say the value of that item as of, we can pick,
right.
today's date, January 9th, is X amount of dollars. But if it were to be looked at, let's say 2 years down the road, that item could be worth less. It could be worth more. It's hard to say. You just never know where the market goes.
And even if they don't like sell it, but they're just getting it valued at that point in time, that's very valuable to somebody. I mean, for myself right
Yeah.
now, I've been on a collection that really centers around wool sweaters. And I've been doing it for probably 6 years, and there's about 18 of them that I'm trying to collect from an original set that was released in the 90s.
Hmm.
And they're called the CCM Heritage sweaters.
Yeah, I
And
know exactly which ones you're talking about. Yeah, I remember seeing those in the shops. So
yeah.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I'm actually in search of just a few, but I also really want to try to find like original catalog of it. I think it would be so cool to like see what the retailers were getting, when like it was shipping to
Oh,
stores as an
interesting.
option. Um, because I'm so obsessed with these jerseys/sweaters that I want to recreate like the catalog when I finally have all of them and stuff. Anyway, I'm sick. Anyway, I know it. But the point
You know
that
what?
I'm getting
That is
at,
dedication. So I appreciate that.
instead of catching me like trying to sneak a jersey into the house, she like catches me with like me over a jersey with like a professional camera and lighting equipment, and she's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" But I'm bringing this up because I have no intention of selling any of these jerseys, but
Hmm.
in the last like year, the value of them has tremendously increased, and so I'm kind of considering getting them appraised because I mean, I'm not that weird in the head that I know that these things are worth like shitloads of money. I just think it's interesting to see that like I could buy these things for a third of the cost a couple years ago that I'm seeing them for now. And
Hmm.
even in the last 6 months, some of these are just going up by like $50, which is, you know, about 30% of what they're originally worth, which is significant, when you think
Yeah.
of it as percentages. So it's just fascinating how like you're saying it ebbs and flows. And I bet if the same like jersey I had was appreciate or valued over the span of these 6 years, it would look like a crazy roller coaster that's now starting to go up, which is interesting. But who's say
Yeah,
it
and
won't go
and that
down,
that
you know?
exactly, and that's also kind of how I base it when I calculate the value of something. Is I do see highs, I do see lows, and it's being intelligent enough to be able to see past the the extremes,
Right.
and I think that's the thing is, somebody can see one item and it's like, holy crap, that thing's worth $500. I want $500 for this. Well, you know what? Yeah, someone does want $500 for it, but the market may be 100.
Yeah. No, for sure.
And
Collecting is very much not well, it's a blend of what it's worth and also what you're willing to pay, right?
yeah, that is actually the best way I can describe it. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's also something about being an appraiser as well, is I went into it to be able to appraise sports memorabilia, but because I am an appraiser, I can't appraise my own stuff because
That's
it needs to be
awkward.
third party and it's considered
Yeah,
a conflict of interest.
that would make
So I
sense.
can't
I
put
mean,
yeah, it's a conflict of interest to appraise my own items, even though I legally produce documents for other
right.
people
But
stating the
that's part of
value
the
of
code, I'm
similar things
sure.
that, yeah, that's called ethics.
Yeah.
But it's weird, man. It's weird.
And I mean, aside from appraising things, you've also been very helpful in this community in helping us understand how to take care of some of our possessions. So, for our listeners out there, Jersey related specifically, I know that you've done videos on how to wash and care for your jerseys. That's super helpful, but also a more common ask. I think one of the less common things that people are wondering is like, how would I go about um, protecting something that's super valuable to me that I want to put in a case or something like that? And I know there's ways that you can. You've hinted at ways that you can kind of protect signatures on jerseys, and then there's also like different kinds of glass that you can put on cases so that it doesn't get sun worn and stuff like that. Do you have tips like
Yeah.
that that you'd like to share
Well,
around care for
absolutely.
jerseys?
And whether it's a jersey, whether it's a hockey card or an autograph photo, um, sunlight is your enemy. It is great to have those things lit up. It is great to have them, nicely focused, but the sunlight will bleach anything
Mm,
and it will actually fade autographs as well. So one of the biggest tips is keep it out of direct sunlight. I'm not saying don't have it in a sunny room, but keep it out of direct sunlight. That would be one of the big things. UV protected glass is quite common these days as well. So if there is some sunlight where it might get a little bit here and there, that will help. It's kind of, although it's not a tint, it does help protect the your collectible that much more. Um, and also, if you are getting it framed and stuff, there are different ways to get things framed. Some of them are more hanger style. Some of them are more, pressed flat kind of style, if there is any matting in the frame, make sure that that is also acid free.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
because acid free matting will preserve your item, but if there is acid in that matting, it can leach into the collectible, and it doesn't matter
Mm.
what type of collectible it is. So one of the easiest ways to actually look for that, um, especially if you know something's been framed up a couple years ago or whatever, uh, most of those mattings are laser cut. And so no matter what the color is of the matting, it can be red, blue, black, it doesn't matter. The the inner material is always white.
Okay.
And if that white stays white, it's acid free. If there's a tint of yellowing to it, there's acid in it, and it's probably
Okay.
best that you look for another solution. I've seen cards ruin that way, 8x10s ruin that way. I'm sure jerseys. I haven't seen directly jerseys, but it would do the same thing for sure.
Yeah. That's a great tip. Wasn't there something about spraying the jersey with
Oh,
something too, right?
yeah. Well, if you are wanting to get something autographed,
Oh,
um,
yes.
and and this is in particular to white numbering or lettering, do a quick spray with unscented hairspray. Let it dry for about 5-10 minutes. So if you are going to a public signing, or even if you were to send something in for private signing, give it a spray first. The numbers a spray first, and that way, when it does get signed, it prevents the marker from bleeding into the number.
I so appreciate that tip. I actually have a jersey up here on display from another Vancouver Canucks jersey collector with the same name as me. And Elias Pettersson likes to personalize all his signatures. So I was like,
Hmm.
I'm never going to get anything signed by him unless, oh, wait, look, this guy is also named Daniel. Perfect. So I've got it hanging up and it's got a little bit of that marker leaching that you're talking about.
Yeah,
So that's exactly what, as someone who loves details to the nth degree, I'm a little bit bothered by it, not enough to not enjoy looking at it all the time, but knowing that that tip exists, I now want to make sure anything I send away includes that because you're basically protecting the fabric so that the marker
yeah,
doesn't bleed into the material and actually just kind of stays as a coating on top of that number.
yeah. Like if it's a dark number that gets
Mhm.
signed, especially with, let's say, or silver or a color like that, for whatever reason, the darks tend not to bleed,
Okay.
or leach in. But if you are looking at more of a white numbering, that is a big help. That actually I found out going to a shop when I was getting a jersey signed. And they're like, "Did you condition the jersey?" I'm like, "I just want it signed." It's like, "Oh, we'll quickly spray it for you." Like, thank you. So then I just hung around for 5-10 minutes in the shop. Well, the player was signing some other stuff. It was a Mark Scheifele signing, and then I got it signed, and that was done. Geez, this year will be, well. It was done in 2011, the year he got drafted. So there's been no leaching or bleeding of that marker since. So I can I can tell from example that it works.
And let me use that as a point of asking you about kind of like some other jerseys that you might be after right now because uh signed stuff is something we both have in common. I just mentioned my Pedersen. You've got the Shifley. You've also got a game worn Klitsum, which is like your description, the best name in hockey, right? Which is just
Yes.
amazing.
Well, the fact that
Um,
his first name is Grant,
yeah.
it just kind of goes along with it.
Oh my god, it's so great, right? So I mean, you've kind of got a game, well, not kind of, you've got a game where you've got some signed. Are you someone that goes after, like, filling out the Jets collection and jerseys over their history? Or somebody who goes after tiers of, like, game worn, signed by player, authentic, rep, like, beer league jersey?
Okay, I see where
Or,
you're
like,
going on this one.
what's your
Yeah.
thing there?
Um, Most of the jerseys I buy, I like to wear. That's kind of my focus. To me, it's more of my own enjoyment. However, when it comes to game worn stuff and signed stuff, those are items that actually game worn stuff I'll wear to expos. Sometimes I've worn them to games. Um, when it comes to signed stuff, they usually don't see the light of day again.
Yeah.
Um, they're just usually in the closet, and I can bring them out from time to time for hey, look what I have. But so, although I do have signed items, especially when it comes to jerseys, it's compared to the other types of items that I do collect. The jersey is usually last on the list to get signed because
Mhm,
then I can't wear
mhm.
it.
Gotcha. And I mean, you've got some like, do you zero in on a specific type of like, do you actively collect jerseys right now, kind of like in search of something? Is there anything on your watch list,
um,
or is there a grail that you're after or anything?
to me, it all kind of comes down to dollars and cents and what I can afford at the time. I just recently saw a jersey that I would love to have got my hands on, but I used some restraint because my money was a little bit low, even though I could have dished out for it. Um, that would have been a Burmese uh, off the back game jersey.
Ooh.
Uh, During his, if you want to call it, second tenure with the Jets, after he spent a year overseas and then came back, switched numbers. Um, but so that one kind of hurt passing.
Sure.
But when I started it, I worked with a guy who was into it. He actually had an Adam Party jersey that I bought off of him. It was a Quad City Flames AHL jersey.
Ooh,
Adam
cool.
Party was a defenseman for the Winnipeg Jets at the time. So
Mhm.
so that was cool. Then I ended up buying a couple other things off of him, even though you know, they were game used jerseys, and he was a little bit hard up for cash. So I ended up just buying stuff off of him once he threw a price that I was willing to pay. Um, so some of those jerseys, I have a WHL training camp jersey that was used during the Hitman in the late '90s. I have a Bridgeport Sound Tigers jersey. It's a Matt Keith jersey, but it's a recycled one that used to be of Daryl Bootland. So the Keith name bar on it is takes up the whole, shoulder to shoulder, because Bootland was such a long name.
Oh, cool.
So
But then
when
they
they
just
stripped off,
replaced the name?
yeah, they just replaced the name bar. So it's a recycled jersey from that. I also have a KHL game jersey of a prospect from the Wild from the early 2000s. I got a couple of oddballs like that, and then the next one I got, which was awesome, that I found was a Jason Jaffrey Manitoba Moose jersey.
Oh,
And
cool.
so not only was it Manitoba Moose, but Jason Jaffrey was part of the first year return to the Jets in the NHL team as well. So it kind of crossed off two check boxes for me. It he played for the NHL, played with the Jets, but he was still a Moose, and I really loved those Manitoba Moose jerseys. So I got that one. And the most recent one I got is a practice jersey out of the British Hockey League, Ice Hockey League, of a player called Daryl Hay, who played with the Moose. But it was a sweet deal on the practice jersey, so I had to grab it. So I bought
Man,
that one
that's
out of the UK.
yeah, you're definitely more, of the obscure stuff, which helps you probably get some of these obscure ones at like prices that
Well,
are affordable too, which is
well,
like
what
cool.
I have decided to focus on is Jets players and or draft picks.
Cool.
That's what I've started to focus on. So I do see some really great jerseys at times, really great prices. But the Daryl Hay one, I just thought the jersey was so cool, and he technically played with the Moose, even though I thought that was good enough.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how when you're like, "I just need a reason, gymnastics, mental gymnastics take over." Yes, okay, great, accept
Yeah,
funds.
exactly. That
Yeah,
that one's
because
interesting because it's all screen. It's all screening. It's not pressed or anything. It's all screened, and it's of course advertised up, way the hell out there. The primary logo is like a freight or some kind of freight company. I don't
yeah, it's that's
know.
another interesting thing about just if you've never seen a European pro jersey or practice jersey. I mean, if you're complaining about ads coming to NHL jerseys, just look what it could be, and I think that's kind of
Exactly.
the argument. It's like, this is the gateway. Like, if you allow one,
Yeah.
it'll eventually look like Europe, and it is kind of like, like
Yeah.
crazy. It's like
Well, the
Times Square on a
AHL has
jersey,
had
but
their, if you want to call it, shoulder patches for many, many, many years
mhm,
already.
mhm.
Um, opposite what would be the lettering on, a captain or assistant on the other side. So,
Yep.
a lot of the old Manitoba Moose ones from before the Jets returned were, Toyota or Pepsi or something along those lines. Toyota was a big one for them.
I
Um,
also
you know,
think that the way that the NHL is going right now, and they've been needing other additional ways to get revenue to make up for like the COVID losses. I hate
mhm.
to say it, but I could see advertising coming to jerseys pretty soon. Um, they already now are going to
I'm
allow them
surprised
on.
it hasn't happened already. Truth be told.
Yeah, I mean, they really, I think they, for some reason, in a lot of the things, I don't like what the NHL does, but their stance on keeping the jerseys pure is like one I really enjoy. And like they seem to be
Yeah,
really knowing that that's a huge revenue opportunity for them, but they're not pursuing it. Like they're trying to avoid it, but they did allow it on all teams for helmets this year. So that is
yeah,
definitely happening.
yeah.
Um,
The Jets have Bell as their sponsor, so my joke on that is I hope no one gets their bell rung. But
That'll happen, like, right into the first game of the season,
exactly,
for sure that'll be used. I mean, I mean, that's gonna be common too. You're gonna see Bell because it's the Bell MTS, and you've got Capital One in
yeah,
Washington, it's the same deal there, like that team building and
exactly.
stuff. So that I just threw that in as a tangent, but, I like the way that you're going about that collection. I think that's pretty cool. I'm curious too, like, did for me, when I started buying authentics, like CCM authentics, I had a hard time buying CCM reps at that point. Did your time at working with the Hockey Hall of Fame and just, finding yourself in an elevator with game used gloves from Steve Eiserman's cup run, like, did that just make it impossible for you to buy anything other than game worn or used or practice stuff after that?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Okay.
I can't say I wasn't even into game jerseys at the time when I worked
Mm,
there. It's just it was awesome seeing the stuff. It was awesome holding the stuff or getting the opportunity to do so. Um, and you know, I always liked jerseys. One of my first, if you want to call it, modern era jerseys, which was a replica, um, was a Calgary Flames one.
mm.
I started following the Flames a little bit when they were making their cup run in '04, which sadly did not materialize. But I absolutely love that one. So, even thinking of their retro jersey, the 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 horse head was the shoulder patch on those
Right.
jerseys, and so I love that.
Yeah, they brought Blasty back.
Yeah, exactly. Some people call it the flaming snot, but I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, and the Buffa Slug and
Oh, the Buffa
Turnberger.
Slug.
I love the names of all of
Yeah, the
these
Captain
slings.
Highliner and
Yeah. Um, so I mean, I I'm curious. I know that your job at the Hockey Hall of Fame was not related to your appraisal business. You weren't like
no,
seeing things come in, appraising things, and then
no. I
sorting
worked in
them and
IT.
categorizing. You
Yeah,
did work
yeah. I worked on
IT,
their IT department. Yeah.
and we have another guest coming on an episode who worked at a company called Migray, depending on how
Oh,
you
yeah.
say it.
Maigret. Yeah,
Yeah,
Maigret. Yeah.
Migray, exactly. You know it.
They
And
do a lot of the Jersey. A lot of the teams use them to for their authentication purposes of game worn stuff, especially.
exactly, and so even though her role at that organization was not also directly related to appraising things, she the privilege of working there did allow her to kind of roam around and describe what she was like involved in on a day to day.
Hmm.
With your ability to work at the Hockey Hall of Fame, it comes with the privilege of having access to things. I'm just curious if there was any times that you found yourself wandering around looking at the memorabilia either on display or back room. Because in my head, the Hockey Hall of Fame is like the Smithsonian, where like there's the display and then there's this back room with like just like Ark of Covenant style shit back there and stuff like that. So curious kind
In,
of
in a way, it
anything.
is kind of like that. Yes.
Yeah.
What you see on the display is maybe 1% at best of their collection. So that just kind of tells
Wow.
you what they have there. When I was working there, that's when they built. That's when the resource center went online. So the resource center is actually in the same building as where the Leafs practice. And so that's why I ended up with things like you said, with some, Iserman game stuff and other players' game stuff in the back of my car because I was dragging IT equipment over there, and I was asked by Mr. Phil Pritchard himself to bring some stuff over there while I was on my way. Yeah, well, that was the year that Iserman got inducted. So
Oh,
usually what happens is when in an induction year, um, players will donate pieces to the hall. And
okay.
then, especially that first year after they've been announced that they've been inducted, those are the artifacts that will probably go on display in the very near future. And then, because they designate the inductee, there's the current inductees are always displayed prominently um, during their year of induction, and then they'll get swapped out later when the next round of inductees come about. But yeah, that was definitely interesting. One of the guys at the All-Star game was um, in Montreal, and a bunch of stuff came back, and there was Zdeno Chara's stick that he used in one of the competitions, and I just I picked up the stick and I stood beside it, and the stick was taller than I was, and I'm like, damn.
Oh man. I'm fairly confident he's the reason there's a change in the NHL for stick length. That
Well,
it was like
tech.
either it could always be this unless your name is Zdeno Chara, or it was like, or now if it's over this long, it can't be this percent of your overall length of your body unless you're Zdeno Chara or something like that.
Yeah, there is a height thing that comes into play when it comes to those guys. I mean, I haven't met Zdeno in person, but at 6'9", I can only imagine he'd be towering over me pretty easily. Me being closer to 6, so yeah.
So so is the resource center kind of where the other
That's where
99%
everything
of
gets stored.
things.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's where the
And that's
majority of it gets stored. It
gotcha.
When it got built, they basically just had a bunch of different warehouses that they just stack stuff in.
Mhm.
The basement, there was a lot of stuff at the same level as the Hall of Fame itself. There was always a bunch of stuff in there. Upstairs in the office area, which is where I worked, there was always a bunch of stuff up there. Since the resource center got built, all that stuff majority of that stuff got moved over. Not to say you won't have anything lingering around, but yeah, that's where it's stored. So they have, you know, professional stick racks and shelves full of, goalie helmets and masks and God knows how many jerseys. And but like, even think of the media publications and all that other kind of stuff. They keep well, everything.
Wow. This would be a really good time to tell me that your job at the Hall of Fame and IT was setting up this brand new 9-layer encrypted safe, and therefore you and I can stage a heist and break in there and steal whatever we want at some time. You're like our
Well,
inside
that would
man.
that would definitely hurt any future appraisal work.
Yeah, I can imagine it, but think of what we could own, and then, right? We would just be able to wear Gretzky's 50 goal and 39 jersey
Well,
and
you
stuff
kind of
like that.
saw what happened just recently here in Ontario when uh, a family friend and their friends, ripped off Walter Gretzky,
Mhm.
and they thankfully the police were able to retrieve. I don't know if anything is missing still or not, but some of that
Yeah,
stuff went
for
into private collectors, and some of those guys have. There's some private collectors with some pretty deep pockets, so they don't really care how they come about it.
yeah, I mean, I'm a Gretzky collector. That's the part that of this I can relate to. The deep pockets part, no contest. I mean, I'm talking about, like, we saw a Gretzky jersey go up for sale like a month ago, and it was valued to go for, it was Gretzky's rookie, one of the jerseys he wore during his rookie season. It was valued to go for between six and $700,000 at auction. Okay, so, like,
Yeah.
that's the kind of level of collecting we're talking about. And the reason I just kind of name drop Gretzky is because there's actually very little Gretzky stuff, relatively speaking, in the hall, because Walter owns a lot of it. Like, he is the gatekeeper to a
Wal-
lot of Gretzky stuff.
Walter he ended up being, shall we call it, a collector before it was popular. Like, when stuff happened back in the day, they would just, they would just either the teams would keep it, they would repurpose things, um,
Mhm.
they would get rid of it, a quick flash sale and out the door or something along those lines. And Walter turned collecting into something popular. Um, I've seen other. I remember years ago seeing a story on actually a Vancouver Canuck collector, and his basement was turned into literally a dressing room, and the majority of the items in that dressing room were all original items that came out of the Canucks dressing room, whether it be jerseys, benches, plaques, the whole 9 yards. Um, so you've always had those individuals, but even you think of jerseys back in the day, and why a game used item today is that much more accessible than even in the 90s or in the 80s. And it's not just due to age; it's because they didn't market it.
Mhm.
It wasn't, you take one of these outdoor games, you might have a player, they might get a jersey for every period. So maybe a player will keep one of them. One for sure will go up for auction, and then they might have another one that hangs around too. So they might actually be using three jerseys over the course of a game for one of those specialty games, as opposed to back in the day, you had your home jersey, you had your away jersey. That was it.
And at the end
So
of the season, you gave it back to the team.
pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, what a great way of putting it, and, um, like, Walter became borderline obsessed with chronicling his son's career. I mean,
He did
some of
that
the
with all his
biography.
kids, though. That's the
Yeah, he
interesting.
did. That's
Yeah.
very true. I mean, that is worth mentioning, because when you read some of these biographies on Gretzky or look at the pictures that they include, it's a museum within this small home in Brampton, Ontario. You're just, like, absolutely blown away, at some of the stuff that is in there, and
Hmm.
it's not like, I mean, Walter as a man was very, he was a forward thinker. I don't wanna spend a lot of time, like, telling you about all of the tricks and trades that he did, but he did things like sit Wayne down in front of Hockey Night in Canada with a blank piece of paper and tell him to trace where the puck was going without looking down at the piece of paper, and I know that that tracking of the puck and imprinting that made affects how Gretzky's able to think, like, 3
Hmm.
or 4 plays ahead later in his career. So Walter
Well,
is
well,
a
we
smart guy, you know?
yeah, yeah. Like even Gretzky's brothers, they although they did have professional careers, Brent, the only one that had a taste of the NHL, but Keith was also a mainstay in the minors for many years. Of
Mhm,
course, he is now with the Oilers organization
mhm.
in a GM, I think assistant GM capacity.
Yeah, I think he played for the San Diego Gulls for,
I believe so.
um, but where I'm getting at is too with, like, this whole, like, m you know, momentum behind collecting and, Walter being that guy and then Gretzky being that good.
Hmm.
I watched Gretzky's last game in April in 1999, and during warmups, he changed his gloves 4 times. During that
Hmm.
game, I think he wore, like, 40 different pairs of gloves. They literally swapped his gloves out every time he came off the ice. So, you go from having, like, the jersey that would be recycled over the years, even within the Oilers organization in his first year, to then his last year in the NHL, and he's wearing 40 different pairs of gloves in 1 game.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, exactly, exactly. Like they knew the market was going to be that big. The amount of gloves that maybe one of those pairs probably ended up at the hall. Some of those, one of those pairs probably ended up in the restaurant. Um,
No doubt.
Definitely something probably ended up in Walter's house. But then the rest of them that got sold off to whether it be the card companies that, um, and that's the thing that it's a pro and a curse in my opinion to the game used market is the card companies will buy the memorabilia, cut it up, and
Cut it
insert
up.
those
Yeah.
insert those pieces of memorabilia into the cards. So for the avid fan, having an opportunity, even if it's a one by one square of a jersey or a glove or something along those lines, to be in the card, it's like you're technically owning a piece, but to to get that piece, you had to desecrate something to do
Yeah.
it.
It's going to be a debate. I mean, again, on the accessibility front of owning
Yeah.
something, like, that's a huge counter argument to it. It's like, not that I'm taking a stance on either side. I'm just pointing out that, you know, like, here's another example. The reverse retros that came out, I was super freaking excited about for a few reasons, but one of them was because the Coyotes and the Ducks made jerseys that look a lot like the ones I've been trying to find for a long time at a decent price. And
Mm,
it's really hard to find, a Wild Wing or a Peyote Coyotes jersey and not pay hundreds of dollars for it. And here's an
yeah.
opportunity for me to buy both of those jerseys brand new, look a lot like the earlier one. In some people's perspective, even better than the original one, not mine. But the point is, now I have a Wild Wing and a Peyote at an affordable price, brand new, and I am totally okay with that. And I
Hmm.
couldn't have I really could never see myself spending the money to afford those originals, but more than happy to spend the money I did on the reverse retros. and I own a Dave Williams Canucks Flying V skate jersey, and
Nice.
I was super freaking pumped when there was a card for sale that had a Dave Williams game used jersey part in it. So now when I display that jersey, I put the card next to it, and it just is a cool way of displaying it. And um, I hate that they cut up the jersey because the jersey part of me is like, that's one less in circulation of, but I also love what it does to my collection and my displaying. So it's
Oh yeah. Well,
it's just
I have binders full of games like jersey cards and stuff. So, um, when the jersey cards came on the market, which the first time it ever got introduced was the mid '90s. I think it was in 1995, 96, Upper Deck, and there was a 10 card set. Gretzky being a part of it, but it was like the top 10 um, um, stars of the game that year. So, technically John Van Beesbrook was part of that set as well. But, there was very limited. There was very limited. Those cards today are still very valuable. But by the early 2000s, you literally had a product and every single pack had a gamed card,
mhm.
jersey card, which is great. But although he had a good career, I don't know how many JP Dumont collectors are out there. So therefore, you can, good luck getting anything for it if you have it. But if you are looking for it, you can get it dirt cheap. So the jersey cards have, definitely the big name stars. They produce fewer of them, so those ones will still command some money. But you still have all the lesser guys. Whether they've had one cup of coffee or an excellent career on the third or fourth line, and those ones can get dirt cheap.
You
So their
know,
value doesn't hold.
interesting. And maybe to bring it all around, what makes it like balance out is, yeah, there's a ton more jersey cards now, but there's also a ton more jerseys for any individual player now.
Yeah,
So maybe it's
that
not
is
like
true.
taking out so much of those game worns from the overall circulation of game worns available. Like it totally is, but not relative to what was ever happening before, you
Yeah,
know?
that's true. I mean, um, over the course of the season, most teams in a standard
What, 3 or
season
4?
length usually have three sets,
Yeah.
2 to 3 sets at minimum, and that's both home and away, excluding the alternatives or
Right.
thirds. And even there, like you said, a heritage game, they probably played with 2 or 3 jerseys that game. Um, uh, for the ones that use a third jersey, they probably had a set of those as well as their standard home and away. So there's a lot of them out there.
And I mean, some of the ways that there's also other jerseys is, just I know this from trying to look at Luongo jerseys recently. There's players that will wear, like, special jerseys and warm-ups for a jersey retirement night, so you'll be able
Yeah,
to get, like, an Aaron Ekblad, um, jersey from the season that was game worn, but actually it was just game worn in practice and or in warm-ups, and also it's
yeah,
not even
warm
with
up
his
worn. Yeah,
number, it's with the number 1 on the back, but it's
yeah.
just a cool jersey. Like, I don't know if there's anyone familiar with Luongo's retirement specifically listening, but that jersey is so cool because the number on the back, the number 1, had laser, inscribed his stats of his career in the number. So it's,
That's
like,
really cool.
freaking cool. Yeah.
Well, I remember the Solani retirement game, and it was actually Anaheim versus Winnipeg. And the Winnipeg Jets wore the 1990s, with the Goal for
Nice.
Kids patch, like the similar jersey to what you're wearing right now.
That's
Um,
dope.
and all of them had the 13 Solani on the back, where all of Anaheim's players had different jerseys from his career with Anaheim with the number 8 on the back. So
That is awesome.
they did a killer job of something like that too, where both teams fully embraced it.
So I'm glad the Ducks had the foresight to make sure they do it when the Jets came to town. That's smart.
Yeah, no, I
I mean,
respect that as well. Yeah. I mean, he did
it's
play on a couple other teams, yes, but he didn't have the success. There was no
yeah,
Finnish flash before Winnipeg, and
yeah,
there
yeah,
was there was not the dynamic duo of Korea and Solani without being in Anaheim.
right.
Those, you know, they were just fantastic.
Well, we've definitely run the gamut on some history of Jets and your time as a collector and time as the Hall of Fame employee and some insights there and just collecting and appraising. I think it's been really fun chatting with you, but I'm not going to let you go without first a trivia if you're down for
Okay, I'm game. Yeah.
that. So you're a huge Jets fan, as it's become apparent to all of our listeners by now. I put three questions together that are related to jerseys and Jets in some fashion. No pun intended. We'll see how you do. It's you get two of three right, you get a prize. We'll figure out something that we can send you as a collector. I'm not going to give you anything in your collection you don't probably already have, but maybe some a patch or some OxyClean or some like old set of hockey cards or
Nice.
something. We'll figure it out. You got to get the questions first though. So
All right,
um,
sounds good.
this first one is true false, and it is the Winnipeg Jets. Either edition of the Jets are an expansion team of the NHL. True or false?
Um, Technically false.
Yes. Technically false
Technically
is what we
false.
wanted. Yes.
Technically false for both versions because it was the merger of the WHA and it was Atlanta that was the expansion and later moved to Winnipeg.
I feel I was looking into this a little bit too about like what was the result of them joining the NHL. And I was really thinking like if you're a Jets fan from the 70s, you're pissed like a lot because your team was super good. You join the NHL and then you're forced to lose like most of your star players in
Everybody.
the like in
They
the
were allowed to keep
re-expansion or
two
whatever.
players. They were
It's
allowed to keep
ridiculous.
two
Yeah.
players.
So
Two.
basically the entire team that is running show in the other league it came from just got completely gutted. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then as that's going on, your foe from your previous league, the Edmonton Oilers, they get crazy good. And then as your team tries to rebuild its glory days and they get really good and they get players like Bobby Hall, the way that the NHL is run at that time for like playoff structure and everything, you have to win your division
Mm-hmm.
and then you have to play someone else from that and then you play for the Stanley Cup. And there's no like reseeding going on. So
Yeah.
even though the Jets finally get good enough to make the playoffs again, they're not just good enough to make the playoffs again. They're like the fourth best team in the NHL, but they have to go into the same playoff conference as the other two best teams in the NHL at the
Yeah. They were
time, the
part of the Smythe
Flames and the
division.
Oilers, right?
Yeah.
So like
They
literally
were the
every year
powerhouse.
that they were so effing good, like 4th overall in the league, they still have to go against Gretzky and the Oilers or Lanny McDonald and the Flames, like, every year, so they're never getting out of the league, like, ever.
Only 1 year did they make it to the second round, and that was a round that I think it was against Calgary that they beat. But Howard was taken out in the Calgary series, so then they lost their superstar player. So they had no chance to.
Yeah.
And the Jets, even though they were fantastic, as you just indicated, uh, the one thing they never were fantastic with was goaltending. So
Okay.
that was always an Achilles for them as well. I mean, Essenza made them credible in the '90s, but in the '80s, the random goaltenders that went around, they were they were they probably would have been amazing backups in any team in the league, but those were our starters. So
Oh
yeah,
man,
goaltending was always a hard part for the Jets,
gotcha.
especially in the original rendition.
And just as they're making it out of the playoffs, like late '80s, early '90s, that's when the league really started to suffer in Canada, and as a result of just the way that the wages were. So
Well, it was a combination of wages, yes, but it was the Canadian dollar.
no,
The
that's
Canadian
that's
dollar,
definitely it
yeah,
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
So wages were finally on the increase, which definitely benefited the players. But now all of a sudden you had a dollar where the exchange rate was sometimes 45%.
Yeah.
So you know, 45% exchange on the Canadian dollar, and when you're paying $1 million in salary to a guy for a Canadian
US.
franchise, US, yeah, that's 1.45 US or Canadian, and they just couldn't keep up.
It's like the Jets are freaking good. They've just like always got the short end of the stick in my opinion because right as they're getting good in the '90s and the team is like getting momentum and stuff, that's when the league expands again and like you have more teams added, you have um players being allowed to be paid in US dollars but like Canadian teams collecting in Canadian dollars. And like that's just not a good recipe for a successful franchise. And so like it's not really the Jets' fault. Like maybe looking back at some of their deals for things like the team versus the arena, sure, but in general sense, that shouldn't be a recipe for a failing franchise. It was more the success of the NHL had a result in a negative way on teams like the Jets
Absolutely
and the
huge.
Nordiques. And it was just like, man, so frustrating that both times that they were like running show and doing super well, they were kind of held back by the way either the league was structured or repositioned. It's just like I
Mhm.
feel for Jets fans like a lot more after reading through their history now, because now that they have like a team and they've like even looking at their playoffs like over the last few years, especially last year, man, like that team was so good. And then you just have, wasn't it Shifley that just got like taken out by Kachuk right away and
Yeah,
just
yeah. In the
decimated
first
by
game,
injuries
yeah.
right into the playoffs. And you're like, oh man, Paul
Well, in the
Maurice, you
first
don't
game they
suck
lost
as a coach,
Shifley.
but
Yeah,
dude,
yeah. No,
you know,
Mo has
it's
done a
tough.
fantastic job for that franchise. So
Yeah.
for any of those that are not a fan of Mo, I will defend him to the end.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, losing Scheif, and then they also lost Patrick Liney as well that first game.
Hmm.
So you have a point per game player, and while 2 point per game players get kicked out of your first game of the series, that's that that's 2/3 of a line. That
You can
is
say
very
whatever you
difficult.
want about the cliche of like we're a better team than any one player, and it's like, yeah, but probably not better than your 2 best forwards, so yeah. Um,
Or yeah, two of your four or 40% of your five best forwards are gone
right.
in one shot.
Like
That's a hard pill to swallow.
and as much as I love Paul Maurice for everything he's done, I also Blake Wheeler for the kind of captain he is, and
Oh, I
I don't
love
care
him.
I don't care what that means in that scenario, that's a hard hill to overclimb, so, I mean, good luck, right?
Yeah, and Ehlers really came into his own during that series
He
as
did.
well, especially for playoffs. So that the steps that the guys took were huge. There was just too many that they needed to
Mhm.
go through.
Alright. Anyway, that was question 1. Congratulations.
Oh yeah, we got
Oh,
questions.
yeah. Oh, yeah. But this one is a really good segue into the next one, and it's around the playoffs and, what the Jets have done in the playoffs. So, it's an like, just, there's no multiple choice, I'm just curious if you know the answer here. What famous playoff hockey tradition involving fans wearing all one color to games was started by the Winnipeg Jets franchise?
Geez, could it be the whiteout?
It is. That's right.
Yes, yes, I know that one very well.
Yeah, that's a dope, that's a really cool tradition.
Well,
That
well,
started
that was back in the day when they were their home color, their home jerseys were white, so it made a lot of
Mhm.
sense.
And it was
And
also to kind of help them out of that really competitive division that we're talking about. Back when
mhm,
they had to battle against the Oilers, the Flames, like what was it
yeah,
called? The Smythe division, maybe.
Smythe. Yeah, it was the Smythe division. Yeah.
So that was kind of like their extra ump from the crowd to kind of help them try to get over this little bump that they had, and
Oh yeah,
the
I have an
tradition
old
stuck.
I have an old pennant of from the Winnipeg whiteout era.
I also love how it carried from um, Winnipeg to Phoenix, and
They
then
tried it there. I respect that they tried it, but one of the things that probably a lot of people don't realize is when the Coyotes were doing it, they literally put white T-shirts on on the seats.
yes, yes, different,
So that's
yes.
that as opposed to the people of Winnipeg coming out in their own white shirts and jerseys and everything else.
That is the coolest thing I talk about with other Jersey fans and going to like being part of a Winnipeg Jets playoff game in a whiteout would be so effing cool because
I actually I was at I've been in Winnipeg playoff games
okay,
back in the 1.0 era, and yes, it's wild. It is
because
it's pretty good.
all it like I wasn't watching 90s Jets playoff games, okay? So I learned about the in Phoenix and I was like, "Oh, that's cool." And like they gave everyone t-shirts. That's how that got pulled off. That makes sense. And then
Hmm.
when I saw like how the Jets are now back and they're in the playoffs again and it's the whiteout again, but then when you look like 90% of everyone has a Jets jersey on. It's not some like t-shirt brought to you by the local paint company or whatever on the back. Like you're just like
Hmm.
seeing everyone in an away jersey of this team, and you're just like, holy shit! Like this team is
Yeah, oh yeah.
like their fans are so awesome. Like I would love to be a part of that. That would look so
Well,
fun.
actually, the last Jets game I ever saw was the year that the Jets were against the Canucks in the playoffs. I think it was '94, and
Okay.
I am that game. I actually was right behind the net. I was sitting beside the goal judge.
Wow. That's
I'll tell
amazing.
you, it's cool to be there that close, but you can't see shit.
Yeah, that's like getting stuck
So,
in the corner by the glass on one side of your head when the play's in the other end. What the hell's going on?
oh, exactly. So I always saw the goalie. Um, my dad was sitting beside me, and he had the post in his way, so he could only see that 20% down the side of the boards. And my mom was beside him, and she loved the game.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, those seats are amazing. I mean, I'd love to be there to see like I've sat like maybe like 10 rows behind the net before, and I got to see Yannick Hansen rip a snapshot that went bar down. And if it didn't hit the net, it was gonna hit my, and I was like,
mhm.
"Holy shit, that was fast as hell." Like, that was awesome, like, the quick release and everything. So to have that experience was great, but in my opinion, the best seats are about 10 rows up in the middle of the rink above where the players are sitting, because you get to
Okay,
see the
yeah,
whole
that's fun
game, you
there.
get to see the interaction going on the bench, and you're above the bench enough that they're not obstructing your view of what happens on ice.
Yeah.
Um, cool, so that was question 2, that only took half one, we're doing, but this is
Yeah,
the
yeah. It didn't take
sidetracks
as
we
long to
love.
get through the sidetrack. Yeah.
But this is the good news, the pressure's off, you've got 2 right off the bat, so this 3rd one can
I know.
be
I was
super
worried.
hard,
So
but
yeah,
I don't
that's
think
good.
it's going to. You're just too much of a historian like me to, like, get these to be stumped by you, but I this one takes us back a little bit. This definitely related to the first part of the episode where we're talking about defunct teams and teams moving around the NHL and stuff like that, so I'm wearing my Jets jersey right now from like
Hmm.
that 90s team, and sorry, the earlier team, sorry, like not 90.
The
Well, yes, the
1.0.
90s team,
Yeah,
but
yeah, that is a 90s jersey. Yes.
but it's also the jerseys that they were wearing early on in their inception in the NHL. And my question for you is this traditional red, white, and blue jerseys of the original Winnipeg Jets when they joined the league actually got their uniform colors and designs from someone else, some other NHL franchise had an influence over the Jets jerseys being this red, white, and blue pattern. Do you know the story there and what franchise
Well,
is responsible for that?
well, that's where they got their stripes from. So it was the Rangers.
Yes, that's right. The GM of the Rangers at the time was John Ferguson, and when he arrived from New York, he brought them with him. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Ferguson was the GM, even in WHA. Um, yeah, there's very few, at least in the current version, there's very few players that are left from even any of the Thrasher lineup. Wheeler, of course, is there. Technically Little, although who knows if he'll ever play again. Um, but Bufflin walking away. He's no longer part of that, and uh, pretty much what they have now are actual Winnipeg Jets era drafted players. There's very few of the holdovers left.
there there was yeah, you're absolutely right, and that's also true
And,
of the original Jets, like the 1.0 Jets, is when Shane Doan retired,
mhm,
what was it, 2017? He was like the last
yeah.
player in the NHL that was affiliated with the Jets, and then like a couple months later, this other player that was drafted by the club that played professional in Germany also finished his career. So that was like the final
Oh,
player at
okay.
all that was
I missed
related.
that one. Yeah.
And
The
then the only other thing that's kind of a tie is I there's no like confirmation on where he is right now. I didn't have enough time to look, but the original equipment manager of the 1.0 Jets, I think
Zinger,
might still be in the NHL. So if I think
Craig
that's like the
Heisinger.
only thing left.
You're
So
talking about Craig Heisinger, and Craig
yeah.
Heisinger is the assistant GM of the current Winnipeg Jets.
Oh well, there you go. So he's back.
So,
He's back there.
so Zinger actually became the GM of the Manitoba Moose during the IHL era after Randy Carlyle stepped away,
Mm,
and he has been with, if you want to call it, True North ever since. So
actually,
Zinger
you
is still
know
there.
why I know this name now, because correct me if I'm wrong. You would definitely, but I have a strong indication that isn't he the one that's leading the Project 11 effort, which is to help
Yes.
raise mental awareness
Yeah. Rick
in
Rippon.
hockey, and that is the legacy project of Rick Rippon, an ex
Yep.
Canucks slash ex Manitoba Moose.
Technically, he was signed by the Jets, but he sadly took his own life before training camp. So,
Yeah, and
yes. Rippon came up. Zinger gave Rick Rippon the first pro contract.
mm,
So he was playing with the Moose. The Canucks loved what they saw, ended up signing him later after successfully playing at the Moose. And yes, so he is the head of that. But yes, he's also the GM of the Moose as well as the AGM of the Winnipeg
gotcha.
currently today.
Well, what a cool like this is just hockey, man. It's so connected. There's some way of like
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's amazing. It's amazing all the tie-ins.
Todd. It's been awesome having you on, talking hockey history, jerseys, Hockey Hall of Fame, appraisals, all that good stuff. And I want to
Hmm.
thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure. How can people get in touch with you if they want their own things appraised, and where can they talk to you more about stuff should they feel the need to?
Absolutely. I am on both Facebook and Instagram. Todd Sawatzky Appraisals. It is a mouthful, yes, but I'm sure I'll be linked to this podcast. So click on there. My details are in there. Also, Todd Sawatzky Appraisals at gmail.com is my email. And yes, even though I may be in different cities and I still am able to perform services, we can work together to arrange if something that you would be interested in. All my estimates are free. We can discuss all that. And if you want to use my services, I'm sure you'll be happy with the results.
Yeah, cheers, man. I've really enjoyed like pinging you when I see something historic and you giving me my some 2 cents there. It's really helped me out a lot. So highly recommend Todd. He's really smart on these kinds of things.
I appreciate the invite to this podcast. It's been fun, and yeah, keep up the good work, man.
Thanks. Well, thanks for your time this morning and have a great and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye.
Absolutely. Take care.